Welcome back to Power in Conversation, hosted by me, Rachel Malcom. Today we are delighted to be joined by Eve Muirhead, former curler and skip of the gold medal winning team at the 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing. Welcome to BT Moneyfield. How's things with you?
Yeah, good. Busy, thanks. How's your training going?
Yeah, not too bad to be fair, in the depths of pre-season, which is always fun, particularly in this heat. But no, it's going good.
It's great.
Shall we head inside and have a chat?
Absolutely, let's do it.
So Eve, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you very much.
Had a busy few weeks, I hear.
I have. I've been here, there and everywhere, but you know what, I would be moaning if I was sitting at home doing nothing, wouldn't I? So I'm loving every minute of it and enjoying this nice weather as well. It's good, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's class, especially when we're in the depths of pre-season here, so it's nice to have a bit of sun. So before we kind of launch into your career, which has been incredible, quite frankly, I quite like to just go back to how it all started. So kind of first thing I want to ask is just like, I guess, why curling, which I'm sure you'll go into, but also kind of how did it all start? So how did you get into it?
So I think I was about 9 or 10. My dad was a world-class curler, and my mum used to take me and my brothers along to watch him. And you know what it's like when you're a little kid going along, screaming and shouting, mum dragging you here, there and everywhere. And you're watching your dad play on like a sheet of ice, you're watching him do his thing, and I just wanted to go and play. I just wanted to go and give it a shot. And my memory is like I remember Dad coming home from a tournament in Canada, and he brought me like this small little brush and these little tiny shoes back, and just kind of took us on in our home rink in Pitlochry, which unfortunately is closed down now. And the first time you go, you just want to go back and play more and more. And I was more or less hooked from the very start. And it's a sport that's a good fun. And being competitive like I am, I realised I did have a good opportunity in it, from getting selected from like regional to national and then international level. And if I do something, I want to be like the best at it. So I never gave up. I made a lot of friends through it, which I think is one thing in sport that's phenomenal, isn't it? Like you meet friends from all around the world. And even here in Scotland, I've made probably the majority of my friends through my sport. So it opened so many doors, so many wider opportunities, and I think I made the right decision to keep pursuing curling.
Yeah, I think so too. You touched on your dad. Obviously, was an incredible curler, and I know other members of your family as well. Was family a big influence on you in like the early stages of your career and throughout your career? And was there any other kind of key influencer or people that impacted your career coming through?
Yeah, my dad for sure was the one that kind of helped me get started. I think one thing about my parents was they weren't at all like pushy parents. Like it was all my choice to do what I wanted to do. And quite frankly, for the first few years, they were taxi drivers.
Yeah, mine were the exact same.
Yeah, and then when you turn 17, it's like the best day of their life, isn't it? When you pass your test. But my brothers as well, like my brother Glenn, my older brother, who's a year older, he would be kind of practicing and having fun alongside me. My younger brother Thomas, he was obviously slightly later in the scene, but he picked up the sport very quickly as well, and we kind of all took to it like a duck to water, if I'm honest. Like we all, it kind of came with us in our genes, and like we always wanted to beat each other. I remember as well, like I walked down after school most days, and I would go onto an ice rink and I would just throw stone after stone after stone and throw hundreds. And I wonder now why I've got like hip problems and things like that, because I look back and I just
overtrained without knowing you were overtrained.
Yeah, absolutely, like kind of burnt all the iron brew and donuts and rubbish that I used to eat back in the day. But I was obsessed with the sport, if I'm honest.
So this is jumping forward a little bit, but just while we're on topic of family, obviously in 2018 you got to go to the Olympics with both your brothers as they competed as well. I think it was 2018, wasn't it? How was that in terms of, obviously, like you say, like you grew up competing against them and them kind of being a big part of like what made you want to be better and stuff like that? How was that to kind of come full circle and all of you be at an Olympics together?
Yeah, like to compete in the Winter Olympic Games alongside my two brothers was very special. And as much as I've won medal in Sochi, medal in Beijing, like I have to say, that Olympics was probably one of the standout memories for me. Even though I came fourth, I think having to compete alongside my two brothers, having my mum and dad in the stands, it really was a special Olympics. And from a young age, I knew we all had huge potential to possibly go to a games, but never once did I think all three of us would be there at the same time.
Yeah.
So it was such great experience. It was such great fun, and yeah, I'm very proud of them to have also had the chance to represent Great Britain, because it's a special moment when you do.
Yeah, and as a young athlete, you obviously were quite talented at a number of things, including obviously your curling, but golf and bagpipes as well, I hear. So have you always been like this driven? Has it always, is like, I guess if someone was to describe you as an athlete, is it driven, competitive? Is that kind of always been your trait, or is that something that's kind of developed throughout your career?
I would say it has always been my trait, for sure. I would say, if anything, it's probably starting to ease off a little bit now.
It's exhausting, I can imagine.
Yeah, it's kind of switched off a little since the games, and to try and get back in a bit of routine on training is proving quite difficult.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've always been very, very driven. As a young age, I also started playing golf as well, and I was also one of those people that after school on like a Tuesday when our medals were, I would get my mum and dad to drop off my clubs at the golf club, and I would walk down after school and play the medal, and then walking down 17 I'd phone them and they'd come pick me up, and I'd go out at the golf course in Blair Athol most nights. It was literally like a 2-minute walk from our front door, so I was very driven with golf as well. There was a point that I probably had to choose curling or golf.
Yeah.
I got offered scholarships out in America for my golf and things when I managed to get down to scratch, but I realised that I didn't have such a big opportunity in golf. I know what a handful of players made it. So it's such a great sport to be able to play, though. I've made so many friends through that as well, and I've been lucky enough to have represented Scotland once through golf. And yeah, it's a sport that I recommend to anybody to try and get into, because it's so social. It's just very good for you in terms of getting out in the fresh air. It's good mentally. Get a switch off, think about different things.
I was going to say, is like having had that on the side while you've still had your curling career kind of going from strength to strength, has that been quite helpful for you as an athlete?
It definitely has, because I think it's something that I can do to just completely switch off.
Yeah.
And on the back of Pyeongchang coming fourth, I went through a pretty tough time, and I kind of used golf quite a lot in the mornings to kind of remind myself that there is other things out there.
Yeah.
Life isn't so bad that you've just come fourth at the games, and there still is possibilities, and it really helped me actually to kind of get through that. But yeah, since a young kid, starting the bagpipes as well, kind of wanted to carry on them till I was at a good level, and lucky enough now I can pick them up and play. And even like, I know we're at the rugby pitch now, but like with my brother Glenn, he used to play for Perthshire and things, and I used to stand on the sidelines crying because I wasn't allowed to go on and play because I just was that kind of person that I wanted to kind of give everything a shot. Like, so it's kind of been from a young age I've kind of had that trait for sure.
Yeah, and you touched there on obviously the kind of disappointment of coming fourth at the 2018 Winter Olympics. And off the back of that, you also had quite a serious injury, I believe, with your hip. How kind of big was that in terms of you learning about yourself as an athlete, and kind of what did you learn, and to then come back and obviously get Olympic gold? Yeah. What did that period teach you as an athlete?
Pyeongchang was, as much as it was, as I said, it was probably my most memorable Olympics with my brothers. It was also probably the toughest Olympics.
Yeah.
I had a shot for a medal, and I had the shot and I missed by less than a centimetre. But that's sport, isn't it? And as a skip, you get all the glory when you win, but unfortunately you do get all the slack when you lose as well. And that hit me pretty hard, to be honest, because I felt like that year we did have a huge opportunity to bring away the gold medal. I then, on the back of that, decided I would have my hip surgery, because I had been fighting an injury for quite a long time and going through quite a lot of pain. So I thought that was the best time to do that. And there's times that you're kind of lying in the hospital bed and you realise, or you think, oh, I'm never ever going to step on ice again. Am I ever going to play sport again? And I was told by my surgeon that as soon as I can get back into, like, slowly, obviously with physio's advice, like, get back into kind of fitness and what you do, because even if you just lie on the couch, like, it's just going to deteriorate, like, your hips. So unfortunately I've always got that to deal with and live with, but I managed to kind of pull myself through and decided I would give it another shot. 4 years is a lot of time to commit to. It's a lot of dedication, and there's a lot of challenges as well. So I'm glad I did, obviously, looking back. But of course, there was times there that, the shoes were about to get thrown in the cupboard.
I'm not surprised. And touching on, like you just said there, a little bit around that disappointment of 2018, you felt fell on your shoulders as skip. Tell us a little bit around kind of what leadership entails in curling, because it is something I'm super interested in, is how kind of leadership is so different between different sports, and I think there's so much we can all learn from each other. But tell us a little bit around kind of what actually a skip in curling has to do and what your job entails.
It's a good question, because I'm the skip and the leader of the team, but in theory we're all leaders in our own roles. And I think any sport, like, yes, there is the captain, but I think everyone has their own roles and responsibilities that they need to lead and they need to captain that. In curling, of course, you're the one that calls the tactics and you're the one that calls the game. But you do obviously appreciate a lot of advice from the rest of your team. But in theory, the winning shots or the losing shots are on your shoulders. But you can't forget that you've got a team behind you that either make those shots easier or harder. So leadership's a funny one, because as a skip you don't want to overlead, but you also don't want to be too kind of under the radar. You don't want to be too quiet. You don't want to be too demotivating. So it's finding that balance that suits everybody. And I think in a team sport, I guess the same as rugby, you've got to figure out what everyone wants to hear, what their strengths are, what their weeknesses are.
What's going to bring out the best
Absolutely.
in them.
And if they're in a hole, what gets them out of it? And what I remember thinking before I played in Sochi just past there, I remember sitting down and just thinking to myself, like, if I make my team feel amazing, like, no matter what, play good, play bad, if I make them feel like they're the best in the world, they're the best players, they're more than capable of winning this Olympic gold, and just, blow smoke up their bums as much as you can. Like, that's the best I can do.
100%.
And that's exactly what I did. And of course it paid off. But I do think leadership's a very, very kind of individual part of sport that you need to realise that you're a leader in your own way, and your team need to respect the way that you lead, and you need to respect the way that they want you to lead as well. So it's like a two-way process. Yeah, absolutely.
But I totally agree with you in the sense of, like, I think feeling valued within a team is so important for everyone within that team to thrive. And it's both for you as a skip as well, to feel valued by your team.
Absolutely.
For you to thrive in that role as well. And it is such a balance. I think and like you say, I do think everyone has a massive role to play in that. One thing I'm quite interested in with your career is, obviously, you have been in a leadership role within curling since a very young age. You know, I think, was it 2009 you were skip both for the junior world champs and the senior world champs in the same year. Have you found that, I guess, your leadership style has changed from leading as quite a young, experienced athlete, but now more experienced and a lot more life experience, for example? Has that changed the way you've led?
It hugely has. Like, if I look back when I used to lead the team, I was grumpy, I was stroppy, I never thought my team were good enough. I thought I was a lot better than them, and I was probably an awful person to play with, if I'm 100% honest. They missed shots, I would occasionally turn my back, I'd slam my brush, I would get grumpy. Not all the time, but do you know what? Like, but then I look back and I think, God, I was just young and immature back then. Do you know what I mean? And probably the first time that really kind of opened my eyes, I got selected for the Vancouver Olympics in 2010, and I was leading a team that was a lot older than me. I was 19, and I think the eldest was in their 40s, and I'm telling them what to do. Yeah. So that probably made me step back a little bit and realise that I can't be immature here. I I can't be the way that I usually or used to lead a team. And that was the start of the learning curve for me, probably.
Yeah.
And I would say every time I compete, I pick up something else that I'm going to get better at, or I pick up something that I want to change. And every time I compete, I never come off thinking everything was perfect.
Yeah.
And I always want to get better at something.
Yeah, I kind of had a similar experience as a leader in a sense, because I came to rugby quite late, and I got the captaincy when I wasn't necessarily a very experienced rugby player, but was quite an experienced leader in other areas. And one thing I like at the start of my kind of captaincy I kind of thought I had to do everything. I thought I had to make all the decisions myself, and I took everything on my shoulders. Whereas like what I learned was there was so many people within my team who were so much more experienced than me. They knew so much more about different areas of the game. And as soon as I started actually leaning on other leaders, like you say, like everyone has the ability to lead, leading on others and using others to help me, and that balance, like that was my biggest learning as a captain.
I think trust is also a huge thing. I think if they trust you and you trust them, and you trust that they're going to do a good job in what they're telling you and what they're leading in terms of roles, and then I think that's a huge thing. I think in sport we never trust enough, and if we can be as open, as honest as what we want to be, if we want to, especially a group of girls, like you know what it'll be like trying to, I know how hard it is to keep 4 girls happy, let alone a rugby team. So God, I take my hat off to you. So I think if you can keep everyone happy, but also be professional as well. Know when to switch off and not on, like know when to switch off and talk about whatever, going shopping, what you're going to have for dinner, but then switch on and it's like game time, and it's they're in theory your work colleagues, aren't they? So.
In terms of curling, like one thing I've noticed from watching it is how, like from a tactical point of view, like your job as skip comes down to like how you communicate, and like communicating things not just through speaking but like other actions and stuff like that. Like how important is it that all 4 of you are on the same page, and like how do you achieve that so that it is so smooth when you come to competition?
The communication is it's a kind of different way of communicating, because if you can imagine, like when it comes to finals and things, you are the sole game on the ice rink, but when you've got other games going on, it can be pretty noisy, or it is very noisy. So I guess it's all knowing the different kind of hand actions for different weight controls, for different shots. They're the probably main things. Sweeping and not sweeping, I just scream my head off and tell them what to do in terms of that, or the thrower.
I think that's the only bit I'd be good at.
I think the thrower as well. Like they obviously help with that. So it all kind of falls into place in terms of the communication, but what we do to get good at that is, honestly, it's team practice, and sometimes you can actually, once you've kind of figured out some things, like even just sitting down around the table having your lunch or a coffee, I think that's also a very good way to figure out things that you're not exactly going to figure out on the ice when you're practicing. But we tried to have, or we had our individual practice a day, or paired with our coach for technical side, but then we'd also always have a team practice as well. And during that team practice, and that's when you work out the kind of small communications, the small aspects of the game that you want to get better at, in which you probably did more of in practice because you're concentrating on that, and then when it comes to playing, it just comes as a second nature, I guess. Yeah,
definitely. Okay, so I want to move away a little bit from leadership now and talk a little bit around kind of, I guess, your achievements. Obviously, within your career, you've won multiple European World Championships, medals at Olympics, but ultimately, and most recently, winning gold at the Winter Olympics. Where does that sit? Was that the kind of cherry on top of the cake? Was that always that kind of end goal? And tell us a little bit around that experience.
From a young child, I remember thinking that I always wanted to win the Worlds. Like the Worlds for me was massive. But that's in curling. And as I grew older, I realised that maybe the Worlds wasn't the pinnacle of curling. I think the Olympics took over everything. Like the hype of the Olympics, the coverage of the Olympics, everything. And I won the Worlds back in 2013, and I then realised that the next job for me was to go and win the Olympics. And as much as we got bronze in Sochi 2014, which you're delighted with, like we we had the chance to get a gold there. We went in as world champions. We lost the semi-final down to the last shot again. And at the time, that was probably my most, and probably still is, if I'm fair, the most devastating defeat of my career. Yeah. And it's hard. I always think a team bronze medal is one of the hardest medals to win because it's always going to be in the back of a loss. And for us, we had less than 24 hours to pick ourselves up and come back on and play the game of our lives, and we did. But the gold medal in Sochi, in Beijing, sorry, was definitely of course, it's the highlight of my career. And I think there's such a huge story behind it in how it came. In terms of, we played the World Championships the year before in Calgary. During COVID, we were in a hotel room on our own for 5.5 weeks, eating out of plastic tubs, plastic cutlery, Deliveroo every meal. And we knew we had to finish top 6 to qualify for Olympics, and we didn't. We failed. And the weeks after that, I remember getting back, and apart from my close family and Red Sky, my management company, not a lot of people spoke to me, because everyone wants to be part of you when you win, but when you lose, they don't want anything to do with you. And I found that very, very hard. Yeah. We then, or British Curling then, put together a squad system to try and get the top 5 players to go to the last chance Olympic qualifier where 3 teams could qualify. The squad system was definitely needed at the time, but it was hard. But for myself, I think it was good because I could just focus on my own performance, focus on my own way of getting better. And I actually joined the squad a month later because I took some extra time off as I was struggling a bit mentally, and for me that was the best thing that I did. So I caught up on everything and was one of those 5 players that got selected. We went on to the Olympic qualifier with a new team and won there, and then of course went to Beijing, and which was great in terms of we didn't actually have too much pressure on us. We didn't have too much expectation from the other nations because we weren't one of the ones to qualify at the Worlds. I think we were ranked, I can't remember what we ranked. We were ranked like middle of the table, I think. And we just kind of went slowly, did our own thing, and we played awesome all week. Yeah. Vicky, my third, she honestly had the tournament of her life. Like, she's one of the most talented curlers I've ever played with, and she managed to juggle nursing during the pandemic and nursing 1 day a week to then be Olympic champion, which I know a lot of people didn't believe that was going to be possible, or no one knew she was capable of doing that. Like, she'd do night shift, she'd come in and she'd practice all day, go home and catch up on her sleep and train as well. So she's retired now, which is going to be a massive loss to curling in general. But of sure, like, the Olympics for me was the experience of a lifetime. To stand on that podium and get the gold medal around your neck is a moment that, like, you're never ever going to forget, are you? No.
And how important do you think it is? Like, I'm sure you're probably too modest to say, but obviously you're like a massive role model and a massive face now that has really grown the game within not only this country but across the world as well. How important is it that more people take up curling, and like, how, I guess, off the back of this, to clubs and things like that capitalise on trying to get more women in particular into the sport and keep them in it?
I would love to think that I've left a bit of a legacy within curling so far, that more people do take up the sport. And it's a bit annoying the timing of the Olympics in terms of the curling season. With the Olympics being February, the curling season kind of finishes April time and the rink's shut for the summer. But I do hope that a lot of people are still interested in giving it a shot, and I know a lot of people are. And I guess it's our job to try and push that. And I've always believed, when I'm still competing as an athlete, that what I can do is be successful, and if you're successful, that's when you get the media interest, that's when you get more coverage, and I think we definitely did that during the Games. So I think it's important in general to get more women in sport, and it's an ongoing issue, isn't it? Like, everyone speaks about it, but I do think from you guys qualifying for the World Cup to the Europeans taking place down in England. Like, I was at the opening game, the England match at Old Trafford, and it was unbelievable. There was 70,000 people there. Like, the atmosphere was electric. And same, I came and watched you guys play in England, like about 6 months ago, I think.
Yeah, a while ago now.
Yeah, and there, like, it was packed. Like, I loved it. It was amazing. Like, the atmosphere is great. So I do think everything's going in the right direction.
Yeah.
But it's just a case of carrying on going in the right direction. Like, I never think we're going to be as big as like men's football, men's rugby, men's golf. Like, it's never going to be that big, but I think we can get closer to them.
It's about how we challenge it to just keep pushing on
Absolutely.
and keep getting better. I think like one thing in women's sport is like previously, like we've always just been taught to be grateful for where we're at and what we've got. But I think like it's about how you put some pressure on to keep it going. But in a way, like I always think as well, like when we were getting asked about like the professionalisation of our sport, like I think it's so important to recognise where we've come from and where we've got to, and like where reasonably we can get to, because without infrastructure and without everything else in place, like what is like we have to have that perspective. So I totally agree with you in that respect. So that has been so insightful and so interesting to hear a little bit about your incredible career. I've got one final question which we ask everyone, is if you could give a younger you advice, so a young Eve coming through as a curler, what would it be?
I would say, if I could give one person advice, I know a lot of people kind of have this kind of cliche, but it honestly would be to not give up. Like, no matter how down you can be, how high you can be, there's always still something out there to achieve. And I think I was close to giving up, but I realised that there was still something out there to achieve, and I turned my hand to it. I did everything I could to get that, and that paid off. So it definitely is that realise no matter what strength, what ability you have, there's always something out there for you to do and to get good at and to enjoy as well.
I think as well on that, like how important it is in those situations to not be afraid to lean on other people around you.
Absolutely.
Like that's something I've very much learned coming through my career, is like in those situations where you think you're alone and you think it's time to give up, there's always people out there that actually really want to support you.
I remember younger, like I would, for instance, when I had my bad hip, like I didn't ask for help. Like I kept that quiet for about 3 years, and it just got worse and worse and worse, and I'm just curling pain, because I just didn't want to ask for help. I thought, I'm too stubborn, I'm not going to ask for help. But yeah, absolutely. I think you've got to realise that, as you say, there's someone always to lean on. There's always people that are going to help you, and it's just being brave and realising it's not a bad thing if you need help to ask for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming in to chat to us, and the best of luck with everything you've got coming up.
Thank you.